My name is L J Simmons. I want to talk today about the national debt. I want to talk about what optimum national debt is and a constitutional approach to get from where we are to where we should be. But what I want to talk about is what behavior needs to change so you're in a position to pay for wars, recessions, and national emergencies. I mean, that's, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to raise taxes enough to bring it, because invariably if you do, you're almost certainly going to restrain revenues. If you cut entitlements, well, yes, you may, but it's not really feasible long term, because if there's one thing the federal government is just not in a position to do, it's to save money. It's just not a realistic goal for them to do. What government does is it takes a percentage out of the economy. As the economy grows, their percentage gets larger. So as long as it's growing, why, you're in pretty decent shape. The problem is when you can't budget for, like I said, wars, recessions, national emergencies. There's also, I want to talk a little bit about an ingrained partisan bias to slightly. Just like in terms of CEO clauses, you have a clawback clause that I'm going to pay the guy a bonus, but if this and that happens, I can get it back. You've got a claw forward bias. As that economy is growing, hey, I don't want to leave funds in the cupboard for that other party to get. I want to get it first. I want to get it for growth, for lower taxes. I want to get it for entitlements. I want to get it for healthcare, education, whatever. But as long as that economy is growing, you've got a bias to fudge that budgetary line. Okay. That pretty much forces you into a deficit. And it forces you into slight deficits as long as you don't set off the inflation triggers. What sets off the inflation triggers, of course, is massive government spending. How in the world are you going to budget for a war, recession, national emergency? Well, I have some thoughts on that. What about a time-sensitive tax? We've got a wealthy country, we've got a huge amount of financial services, huge amount of incredible software that tracks markets. Well, let's have the federal government trade time for a higher tax rate. I'll make a deal with my wealthiest people in the country. I'll let you take 25% of your net worth. I'll let you run it 50 years, and then I'm going to tax it at a 50% tax rate. Okay. Compound interest being what it is, you can see these phenomenal sums of money even at very modest returns. 9% return in 50 years. That's going to double every 8 years. Yes, you can see very quickly how that's going to affect it. And then you would do it again in 25 years. So by mid-21st century, you're going to see a revenue bubble, multi-trillions, every 25 years coming into the federal treasury. And it's going to be voluntary, okay? The government is not really expending anything, they're just trading time for a higher tax rate. Well, to do that, it's going to take a change in constitutional framework. You're going to have a nasty moat around this money, otherwise it's going to get pilfered. You know what's going to happen. Time-sensitive tax to achieve optimum national debt. This would be the constitutional amendment. Congress has the right and the responsibility to enroll individuals in an approximately 50-year tax-free dividend and capital gains reinvested program. This will be in exchange for a one-time 50% tax rate. Congress has broad discretion in who is allowed to enroll and has broad discretion over the site. No other taxing authority is allowed to levy any taxes or assessments of any kind and the U.S. Congress will take all necessary actions to keep foreign governments from taxing any disbursements. When you talk 50 years down the line with descendants, you're almost certain that somebody's going to be moving to a foreign country. This is a shot across the bow that we're going to protect it. It's a one-shot tax deal. Congress will oversee the responsible disbursements to the descendants of the enrollee. So Congress is going to also tell the enrollee that grandkids, great-grandkids, I'm going to be prudent. They get college, they get reasonable amount of per diem, hefty down payment, but for those years, particularly up to 30, reckless youth being what it is, it's going to be monitored. So the enrollee does have a certain degree of comfort that it's not going to be blown. Okay? Would Congress welcome this? Well, yes and no. After all the effort and after all the work, if you went through all of that, it wouldn't surprise me to see Congress be very tepid in terms of enrolling. And I would say tepid would be probably 20 to 30 billion. You probably need 40 to 50 billion to have the kind of money that you're looking forward that you need. So you have multiple trillions. Okay? That states are completely at the mercy of the federal government for financing wars, recessions, national emergencies. There exists no political framework to pass credible revenues to future generations other than a growing, expanding economy. Pass credible revenues. You pass bridges. You pass highways. You pass educational institutions, but they don't generate revenues. You're limited to the growing, expanding economy. And in our economy, it's roughly, not quite, it's 50-50, but predominantly it's corporate tax and graduated income tax. And that's more and more on the graduated income tax side. And I think this is probably the most important. There's a moral imperative, as well as a fiscal and security aspect, to be responsible for sovereign wealth. I can't think of anything much more logical than that, particularly in this time frame. We're fighting a war, a nasty war, where we've got lots of infrastructure to defend, trillions of infrastructure, against an enemy who has no infrastructure to defend and doesn't care. We've got a right not to let this deficit demon move on down the line. It needs to be stopped. At some point in time, it needs to be stopped. The line in the sand needs to be drawn and said, this is it. Now, what optimum national debt is, I don't know. I know it's not 80% of GDP. I know it's not 60. And you're going to, make me reach out there and say, I'd say 20 to 40. That time frame, 20 to 40% of GDP, is a rough goal. But you're not going to get it unless you look at this problem different. And you're not going to get it there unless you look from a different angle and come into it on the time side. I want you to be the last generation to ever look at this deficit demon the way it is. If it's going to be kicked on, I want its Achilles tendon slit, so when other generations look at it, it's basically immobile. I want to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it.
I thought it was great.